Hey guys, welcome back. On today's episode, we are going to work on our like functionality over here. So let's get started. Now, before we do that, I would like to make a small little change to our filter, the selected filter that we have on our post list component. I just would like to change the UI a little bit. So let's open it up. Let's open our post list. First thing I would like to do is when we are displaying the active category, we are showing all posts from. I'm going to get rid of this text. I think just showing the category itself should be enough. And then I would also like to, when we search for something, make the searched item or the search query to be bold. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna add a strong tag and wrap it, put our search term inside. And now by Intelligent CSS, that should basically add a nice looking bold here. You can also use a span and give it the font bold if you like. And for this containing, I think it looks okay for now. Maybe let's go lowercase. All right. Looks okay. And actually while we'll add it, let's also wrap it around a span. I would like to add a little bit of margin left. So let's do class margin left of 2. Okay, so I think it looks a bit better now. If you guys would like, we can go ahead and add a bit more changes to it. I'm happy with this. So let's get started with our like functionality, guys. Before we actually create the Livewire component, I think it's best we create our database and set up the migration. So let's get started with that. So open up the terminal. Now for our likes, it is going to be a relationship between our users, our user model, and our post model. Now the way many-to-many relationships work in Laravel, the general convention is you are going to use a singular name of the models, which is going to be user and post, and then order them alphabetically, right? So in this case, it should be post user, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah, so the P comes before you. I'll just double check in my head again. Now, personally, I think post user is a little bit, it's not very descriptive. You can't really tell it's about liking, right? It's more like the authors of a post. That's what, that's how it looks to me. So I'm not going to actually use the Laravel convention, right? Now you can name yours likes. You can use it post likes. It's up to you what you're going to name it. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and use a post like. I think this is going to be the name I'm going to use. I'm still going to try to follow the singular format that generally happens inside Laravel. However, this is not something you have to follow. It's just, you know, what you generally see inside the Laravel community. People use this format. And again, Laravel, because if you follow this, it will be able to automatically detect your table. So let's go ahead and create our migration. So I'm going to say PHP artisan make migration. Now for many-to-many relationship, you generally don't need to create a model. Some cases you may need to do that, but in our case, I don't think it is required. So we can go ahead and say create post like table, okay? And adding this table and create at the beginning of the name is actually quite important. I believe that's how Laravel knows that you're creating a table. So it will automatically add the boilerplate code for it inside your migration. Basically this part, Laravel automatically added that. I believe it detects that from this create table, okay? So now that we have this, guys, we can go ahead and create our like table. And this is going to be relatively simple. We only need 2 foreign keys here. I'm just going to say we can use foreign ID or we can use a foreign ID 4. This one accepts a class. Since I believe I used this one for an ID 4, so I'm going to go ahead and use for an ID. I generally try to use whatever method throughout the entire project. So here I'm going to say user class, and then the same thing for our post, right? And I believe that is all we have to do. Now you can also go ahead and add some indexes to these if you guys would like. So it's up to you how you want to do it. Now I believe by default for an ID 4 does not add an index. So if you want to add an index, you can just go ahead and call index on here, and then it will go ahead and add an index for this, right? So it's up to you if you want to do that or not. If you want to optimize your project, I think I'm going to go ahead and add an index on the post itself, because that's probably how we're showing it. I don't think at the moment we don't have a design for showing all the likes for a user, okay? But if you want to do that later on, maybe we can go ahead and add an index for both of them, okay? And of course, you can remove indexes as well. If you accidentally add one or you don't want it, you can always remove it as well. So let's go ahead and run this PHP artisan migrate. Now we do have one issue with this approach, and that is if later on you also want to add the ability, for example, like comments, this table is not going to be useful, right? So it forces us to go ahead and maybe create something like comment like table, right? And it looks very ugly, obviously, if you have later on add the ability to like users or authors. So in those cases, you want to go ahead and use a polymorphic relationship. I'm not going to be covering that today, but if that is something you want to do, just Google Laravel polymorphic relationships, and it's probably what the approach you want to take. in those instances. But in this project, that's the only functionality we need. So now that we have this, guys, we can go ahead and actually create our Livewire component. So let me close this, open up the terminal. Let's type in PHP artisan Livewire make, and I'm going to name it like button, hit enter. And now that we have our Livewire component, we can go ahead and actually move our like button code inside this blade file. So let's save this. So let's open up our post item blade file, which is basically what we use to display a single post. The like should be somewhere down here. It's over here. It's an SVG with an A tag inside an int tag. I'll cut this. I'll move it inside our A button. Now, instead of an A tag, I'm actually going to replace this with a button. And for now, we'll leave it as is. And let's go ahead and include it inside our post item. So we can say Livewire like button, just like this. And that should get the job done. So let's do reload. And as you can see, we are still able to see it. Now, when you are doing adding Livewire components, generally because this like button is actually inside our post list, so technically we have a child component inside our post list, it is always best to give it some sort of wire key. So in this case, if you want to give it a key, you can just say key and then give it some unique value. Okay, so in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and pass in the post ID. All right, now this is important, especially if you have pagination. The way Livewire handles child components is they are their own complete island. So if the parent, which is this post, changes, it will not re-render the child component, right? So for example, if I were to go on page 2 and I didn't have this wire key, it won't actually go ahead and update this button. So it's still connected to the button from the previous page, right? As you can see, right now, I didn't actually save this. As you can see, we lose our like buttons, right? So it's a bit buggy right now. So it's quite important that you always add wire key if you have child components. Now there are a few more tricks involved about it as well. Now that I saved it, if we try again, if I go to the next page, now we can see it, right? So before we didn't see it on the upcoming pages. So make sure you add this wire key. And there is another trick that I'll show you guys at the end of the video about it as well. All right, so now that we have this, guys, let's go ahead and actually implement our post like button. So this is our Livewire components. Now, in order for this to work, we need to know what post we are liking. So this is relatively easy to do. What you can do here is we can go ahead and define a public property. Now we can accept a post. So by default, Livewire does have a limit on what kind of types you can accept on your public properties. However, you can use models here. So we can go ahead and use a post here. Now, this can sometimes cause an issue if you don't want, because public components are publicly accessible by the user. I'll show you guys what that means in a second. So in those cases, you may want to, for example, use post ID, right? Something like that. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and use a post, and I'll show you guys what I mean by the potential issue. And then now that you have defined this, you can go ahead and actually accept it inside your mount function, right? So mount is like a constructor inside Livewire components. So here we can say $post. And then once we accept it, we can say this.post equals post. So in order to pass this to our mount function inside our post item, we can go ahead and say post equals post. So now that we have this, it'll go ahead and automatically pass it into our mount function, and then we'll update our public property. Now in PHP 8 and above, you actually don't need to do this. You can actually remove this part, and Livewire will automatically go ahead and set it to your public property. So that's why I'm not going to be writing it from now on. And also inside Livewire, there is actually a shortcut. Instead of, if you're using post and then the variable inside is also the same name, you can go ahead and use this syntax. I just add a $sign between the colon and this, and it will be the exact same thing as the code we wrote previously. So that's it for now, guys. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and say dd this.post, just so we can see if it's working or not. And if you come over here, as you can see, guys, we got a collection, right? So it is indeed able to successfully pass in the post to our button, right? So I'll get rid of this. Now inside our post, we do need to add a button function for liking and unliking. So we can have two separate functions, or we do what I'm going to do, which is basically I'm going to go ahead public function toggle like. So this button will basically handle both liking, and we'll come back and write the functionality in a second. For now, just define it. So let's go ahead, open the like button. We can go ahead and add a wire click on top of it. So wire click, toggle like. We don't need to pass anything to this function because we already know we have the post we are liking in as a property. And then inside here, what I would like to do is when we have liked it, I want to show this, I want this to be like a red button, red color. So let's reload. So we'll do that in a second as well. So for now, let's go ahead and actually implement the like and unlike functionality so we can actually do something about it. So when we are liking, first thing we need to do is we need to ensure the user is logged in. If they're not logged in, we should redirect them to the login page. So let's go ahead and add that check. Now here you can use either the auth facade or auth helper. So I'm going to use the auth helper and I'm going to say guest. So there are a few ways of doing it. This guest basically ensures if the user is not logged in. So if the user is not logged in, this guest will return true. So if the user is a guest, we can go ahead and redirect them, right? Now, in order to redirect in Livewire 3, because we are using Wire Navigate, and let me comment this for now. Because we're using Wire Navigate, obviously we're not reloading the page. So if we use a regular Laravel redirect, it will go ahead and reload the page. So if we don't want it to happen, we can go ahead and say $this redirect. So this is a new method in Livewire 3. It's part of the component class. And then here we can go ahead and pass it some URL. So here I'm just going to say route a login. So redirect the user to our login route. And then as the second argument, if you guys can see here, it says navigate false. We need to set this to true. So it will go ahead and use Wire Navigate. So it will not reload the page. And right now, luckily, I'm not logged in. If I click on one of these buttons, it takes me to the login page and it did not reload the page, right? So very nice as well. So now that we have checked the user is logged in, we can go ahead and get the logged in user. So I'm going to say user equals auth user. So this is how we get the logged in user on our application. And then we need to check if the user has already liked the post. So if they have already liked it, we will unlike, and otherwise we'll just like it. So here we can go ahead and say has liked. And in order to achieve this, guys, we need to get the user, and then we need to define the relationship on for the likes. So let's go ahead and open up our user model. And here, down here, we can go ahead and define the relationship. So I'm going to say public function likes. And here we can say return this dot belongs to many. So we are going to use a many-to-many relationship. We have already done this for our categories, guys. So I'm not going to try to explain this too much. It's going to be exactly the same thing. So here we're going to say post class. Now we also do need to pass in the table name. Okay, so because we are not using the Laravel convention, which was basically going to be something like post user, we actually need to pass in the table name. So the table name we were using is post like. Okay, so we have to go ahead and pass our table name here. Let me open it up here. Yeah, right. So we have to pass it in as a second argument. And then next up, you need to also say with timestamps. So this will go ahead and set the created at and updated at for us automatically. If you don't pass this with timestamps, it will not go ahead and do it. All right. And the reason we need to define this is because the timestamps are optional. Some people may not define it under pivot tables. So that's all we have to do. Now that we have this, we can go ahead and decide our like button. We can get the likes relationship. Okay. And here, basically what you can do is you can go ahead and check if there is a post with the ID of the post we have. So here we can say where post, where ID is equal to basically this dot post dot ID, right? So if we have a like that matches the ID of the post we have, then we can, in order to check it, we can just say exists. Okay, so exists. And that's it. So now this will let us know if the user has liked a post or not, right? And so we can do a simple if statement. I'm going to say if has liked. If the user has already liked it, we can go ahead and unlike it. So in order to unlike it, we can say user likes. So we get the likes relationship. And then in order to unlike, we can say detach. And inside this detach, we can pass in our post, which will be this dot post. We can also pass in the post ID. Both of them will work just fine. I'll just go ahead and pass in the post itself. And that's all we have to do. And then we also need to return. So I'm going to say return. That just lets us know that the like is successful. Else, basically, if the user has not liked it, we can go ahead and do the opposite of this, which is basically attach. And I'm going to say attach. It should have two T's. And that's all we have to do for now, guys. I will refactor this in a second. For now, I just want to make sure that it does work. So I'm not sure if I have my database ready here. I do have Table Plus over here, guys. And I do apologize if it's too small. For some reason, Table Plus does not have a zoom functionality. We can only zoom inside this query section, which I'm not sure why only here. It doesn't zoom anywhere else. But basically now if I reload, we should have our post like. Okay, so this is the table we just created. so we can test if it's working or not. So I'm going to reload the page, click on the first post. Okay, I need to log in first. Let's try again. Start reading. Let's click on this like button. We didn't get any error messages. Okay, we do have an error message. So let's see why this is happening. It's telling us column ID is ambiguous. Yes, okay, I have made a mistake. It should be post ID. My bad. Yeah. Let's try again. And now it seems to be working. So let's do a reload. And as you guys can see, we have added our first like button. Let's go create on another button. So I'm going to click on this. So we have liked another 2 posts. Let's do a reload. And as you can see, we have liked post number 1, 43, and 87. All right, just like this. Good. So now that we have this, guys, I believe we can go ahead and also update our blade file. So in this case, what we need to do is we need to make sure we need to have a way to check if the user has liked the post or not, which is basically we already have it. It's this functionality over here, right? So let's go ahead and move this to our user model. So we don't have to do it. We can reuse it easily. So let's go open up our user model. I'm going to say public function has liked. And here we're going to accept the post. And we can do the exact same functionality we had over here and move it there. So I'll copy this part of it. And here we can say return this. And yeah, so now we can reuse this wherever we like. Now we also need to update this. So instead of this.post, it should be just post. And I believe that's all we have to do. I think this should get the job done. So we can go ahead and reuse this anywhere we like. So first case is going to be inside here. So I'll just go ahead and inside this function, I'm going to say a user has liked this.post. All right, so that's the easiest approach. And then after that, inside our blade file, we can also do the exact same check. So we can do an echo here and do an inline conditional and say if auth user, so we get the logged in user and say has liked post, then go ahead, if the user has liked the post, we can go ahead and show the red version, which is going to be text red 600, else we show the gray version, right? So if the user has liked it, make the button red, otherwise make it gray. So a simple inline statement like this should get the job done. Now we will have an issue here because this auth is going to return null if the user is not logged in. I'll show you guys how we can fix that in a second. But let's do a reload, and all these that I have liked are red. Let's go to page 2. These are gray. If I click on it, it becomes red. Next part, we need to actually show the number of likes we have. And for this one, we can go ahead and say post.likes. So we need to get the likes relationship. And then here we can just say count to count them. Now we don't have this relationship defined on our post model. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's say post. Where is it? So I like to define all my relationship one after each other. So I'm going to add them over here. So I'll copy the one we have from our user model actually. It's going to be exactly the same. The only difference is we need to change up this post into a user. And that's all we have to use, okay? Very nice. So now this should also work. Let's do a reload. Now it's telling us likes does not exist. Yep, now it's working. So we get 1 here, we get 0 if I like it. This one also becomes 1, as you can see, guys. And if I click on it, obviously it unlikes it. So it is working fine as well. Now we don't have an issue if I log out and I go to the blog page. It's giving us that has liked is null. So this is something we can, there are a couple of ways of solving this. So first one, you can do a simple check if the user is logged in and then go ahead and perform this kind of check over here. There is another alternative as well. We can maybe, I believe this is the new syntax. I could be wrong. And so this is the new PHP 8, I believe, syntax, where it checks if the user is null, it will just return a null. It will not perform this last check over here. And for some reason, I believe, syntax highlighter on VS Code is not detecting it, but basically that's the syntax you can use inside PHP 8. And I believe we are good to go, guys. I think our like button is now fully developed. So let's try it out. Obviously the login works. If I log in, let's try to like a few posts. So this one works. I'll go to page 2. Seems to be working. I'll go to page 3. It is also working. Now we do have a small, it's not really an issue, but something to be aware of with just how Livewire works. If I were to duplicate our page, And on page 2, I'll go ahead and unlike the first post, okay? So I have already unliked it. If I come back to page 1 and I perform a search, let's say I search for Laravel, and I click search, technically our post list component got updated, right? It reloaded the component. However, our like button did not get reloaded, right? Because it is its own Livewire. Basically, because it's a child component and it's a unique Livewire component, the way Livewire handles child components is by default, they are not reloaded when the parent component is updated, right? So the only way you want to update it is if the key changes, right? This wire key we added. So if the wire key changes from each re-render, it will go ahead, let me find it, post item. So if this key value doesn't change, Livewire will not reload the child component, right? Now this could potentially sometimes cause issues, it may not, it's up to you. Now in Livewire 2, there was a trick you could use if you wanted this to happen. You could pass it in like now, and this will always update it on every reload. So that was one trick we could use in Livewire 2. And if I show you guys how it works, right now both of them are 0. If I like it on page number 2 and I go back to page number 1, it actually is updating it, right? So that's one trick you could use in Livewire 2. Now in Livewire 3, there is another approach you could take. There are now reactive props. So with reactive props, you could do something like this. Let me open up our like button. So what you can do is you can go ahead and give this an annotation of react. So yeah, so let's go ahead and add this an annotation on it. It's called reactive, okay? And what this reactive annotation will do is it will make it so whenever this value of post changes on the parent element, it will also go ahead and automatically change it on the child component, right? So it removes the need of using that trick that I'll show you guys about adding a time, right? Or now. So let me open up post item again. It's post list. I meant post item. So if you use reactive components, it kind of removes the need to do now. All right. Now it does have some drawbacks as well. You need to kind of experiment and see what works on your project. But now if we go ahead and we try it again using this new reactive, it should also work as well. So I'll reload both of these pages. Both of them are showing 1. So I'll go ahead and I unliked it on page number 2. I'll go back to page number 1. I'll do a search. Laravel. And now it also became 0, right? So I didn't have to use the now trick, right, anymore. And I can try it again one more time. I'll like it over here. I'll search again and it automatically reload. So it's up to you guys. I don't really care about the functionality. Like if someone likes it on another page, it should update here as well. But if you really care about that or it's important on your project, you can maybe look at reactive props. All right, so that's it. One more issue I want to cover, guys, before we end the video is for some users, if they have slow internet connection, they are going to get a very bad user experience. So let me show you guys. So open up developer tools, go on network, and on the throttle, go ahead and select slow 3G. So let's say you have a user and they have a very slow connection. They're on mobile or something. And they click on the like button. So let's see what happens. I click on it. Nothing happening, nothing happening. So the like happened like 3 seconds after, right? And if the user has an extremely slow connection, which does happen, right? So if you have a large website with like hundreds and thousands of monthly users, a good percentage of them are going to have very slow connection, right? So for them, when they click this like, it's going to take like 10 seconds, right? So during that 10 seconds, there is no feedback. They don't know if the button worked, if it's their network. So some users usually panic. They press the button like 20 times. That's not something I like. So there is a way we can fix this, and I'll show you guys how we can do it. So first thing is we can actually disable the button if we are sending a request. Say they don't send duplicate requests. So this is relatively easy to do. We can go on a button and say wire.loading. So this loading means we are in the middle of performing a request. .attr basically allows you to add an attribute, and we say disable. So when we are loading or performing a basic request, disable the button so they cannot press it. So that's the first change. And then one more thing we have to do is, what I would like to do is when we are performing the request, I actually want to get rid of this heart and show a progress bar or a loading bar. So they know that we are actually in the middle of liking. So this is relatively also easy to do. So in order to hide this SVG, which is the heart, we can go ahead and say wire loading remove. So this will go ahead and hide the element, this SVG, when we are performing a request. So let's try it again. I'll reload the page. I click on, we do need to open up the developer tools to apply the slow network. So now if I click on it again, as you can see, the heart went away and then it comes back again. Now, this does have an issue. It will also work if you have a very fast network. It like comes and goes quickly. I don't want that to happen. So what we can do is we can say wire loading.delay. And what delay does is only removes it if the request takes longer than, I believe, 300 milliseconds. It's either 200 or 300. It's a bit nicer. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and display a loading bar in the opposite of this, right? So when you're loading. So for the loading bar, I'm just going to go ahead and take it from the Filobyte website. I use this in my videos. I haven't actually used this on any production websites, but it does have a nice collection of elements. So I'm going to search for a loading indicator. And let me zoom in. So on their website, they have some free Tailwind CSS loading indicators. So you guys can create yours as well, your own as well. So I'll copy this one that they have on their page. It's called default indicator. Should be easy to use for us. It is taking quite a while to load. All right, so I'll just copy this inside of it. I think we need to copy the entire thing, right? Yeah, let's just copy it. Whoa, what happened? We can also use this one. This one also looks very nice, actually. So I'm not sure. Let's see which one is the best. Let's just take this one. It's the, I think. All right, so now we can go ahead and paste this over here. Now we might need to adjust the size. So here it has like width for 50 something. We do not want that. So let's get rid of this. As a matter of fact, I don't even want this loading. Let's just have this VG icon, okay? And in order to show something while we are loading, we have to say wire loading. Okay, so it's basically the as long as you don't have this remove, it will go ahead and show it when we are loading. And we also need to do delay. So we only show it if the request takes longer than 200 milliseconds. So let's do a reload. Let's see if it's working what we had just added. So I'll do a quick reload. And this slow 3G is very slow. So I click on the button. We get a loading bar and then it updates. Right now, this progress bar is a little bit too big. So we could probably update it here with height is 8. So for our heart icon, we are using W6 and H6. I'll use the exact same height. And I also believe it has some margin. Let's get rid of the margin as well. And for the color, we can use a different color. For example, here I'm going to say red. Okay. So let's try again. Let's do a reload. I click on the heart. We get a progress bar. And then as you guys can see, it goes away. And if you are on like very slow 3G, it also still shows in. Looks very good. And then if you don't have any throttle, so it's like super fast, it is still showing. Interesting. The request is actually taking quite a while. I'm not sure why. Let me reload the page. Yeah, now it's happening super fast. Okay, so I think it was still applying the throttling for some reason. As you can see, just like this, guys. Okay, so that's how it works, guys. Super easy to implement. We have our like button. And we are also showing a progress bar. Now, because we are using reactive props, it is also showing it when we change the navigation buttons. So you may not want to add reactive props. Let me try this again. I'll remove this. So now that I'm changing it, it's not showing the reload bar anymore. So there's one side effect of the reactive element is that when we changed pagination, we were saying the loading, right? So it was performing a network request because it was reloading the entire like button. So if you don't want that behavior, maybe you can remove the reactive part, okay? And for me, I don't actually like it, but because I don't think it adds any value, but something I wanted to cover so you guys are aware. So that's it, guys, for today's episode. I hope you learned something new. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comment section below. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Have a great day. Bye.